are going to learn about evaluating algebraic expressions. This is in section 1.2 in your textbook on pages 75 through 76, and we're going to work problem numbers 2 through 42 even. Evaluating algebraic expressions is when they give you an expression including variables and you are told what that variable stands for and you have to plug it in. I will tell you a little bit of a golden rule for evaluating algebraic expressions is that whenever you plug in a variable or a number for a variable, you do have to use parentheses, and I'll show you what I mean by that. So on number 2, we have 4c minus 2b. They tell us that c is negative 4 and b is 5. So what we're going to do is, in place of those variables, I'm going to put parentheses and I'm going to find out what those variables are and plug them in. So we said that c is negative 4, and all of these values up here are values they gave you in the book. So c was negative 4 and then b was 5. So now they want us to evaluate. So we have multiplication, we have subtraction, and then we have multiplication again. So remember, in your order of operations, that's please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. Remember that multiplication is going to come before subtraction. So we need to take care of both of these multiplication problems first. So 4 times negative 4 is negative 16. And then that negative 2 times 5 is negative 10. Then subtraction. Negative 16 minus 10. Remember, your rule for subtraction is keep, change, opposite. You're adding and your signs are the same, so you add them together. Keep the sign of those numbers. So for problem number 2, your answer is negative 26. So number 4 is almost identical to number 2. You're doing the same exact steps. So for A, we're going to plug in negative 2, and notice how I surrounded it with parentheses. And then C is negative 4. So now I evaluate. So I'm going to take care of my multiplication before my subtraction. So 7 times negative 2 is negative 14. And then negative 2 times negative 4 is positive 8. So now we've got negative 14 plus 8. You're adding, and your signs are different, so that means you're going to subtract. 14 minus 8 is 6, and the negative was the larger number, so our answer is negative 6. Now looking at problem number 6, we have negative c squared plus 5c. I think out of all of the problems in this section, this is the one that confuses everybody. So we're going to take it a little slow. So c was negative 4. So what I did was I rewrote my problem, and every single time I got to a letter, I went ahead and plugged it in that letter's value, which was negative 4 for those C's, and I surrounded it with parentheses. So if you recall the lesson from section 0.2 on opposites, we discussed that a way of saying this is saying the opposite of negative 4. So the opposite of negative 4 is a positive 4. And what I'm going to do is, I didn't do anything with that squared, so I'm just going to bring it down. So now I have 4 squared plus 5 times negative 4. Well, this is an exponent, and so exponents come before multiplication and addition. So 4 squared is 16 Bring everything else down because we didn't do anything else yet. Now we have addition and multiplication. So we're going to do the multiplication first, which gives us 16. And then 5 times -4 is -20. Keep, change, opposite. 16 plus -20 should give you a -4 because you're going to subtract because your signs are different. So 20 minus 16 is 4, and then it's negative because 20 was larger than 16. Okay, now let's move on to problem number 8. They like using C, and I think the reason is because C is a negative. So just be prepared for that. It looks like for every single problem just about they include the C. So we've got 6C squared. So I rewrite my 6, and instead of writing C, I'm going to write -4 and then squared. So we have multiplication here, and then we have exponents here. Remember that order of operations that we talked about? Your exponents come before multiplication. So we've got to do this part first. I know you're tempted to multiply the 6 times -4 first, but you can't. So bring your 6 down, and then -4 squared. That means -4 times -4, which is a positive 16. So now I can multiply 6 times 16, which will give us 96. Problem number 10, 3a squared plus 4c. So a was -2, and then c is -4. So all I'm doing is plugging in my values for those variables there. So I've got multiplication, exponents, addition, and multiplication. Remember, exponents come first between all of those. So I have to do my -2 squared first. So -2 squared means that's not going to work there. -2 times -2, which is a positive 4. Bring everything else down. So now I have multiplication, addition, and multiplication. So let's go ahead and take care of the multiplication. 3 times 4 is 12. 4 times -4 is -16. So 12 minus 16. Keep, change, opposite, and you should get a -4 because you subtract them and you keep the sign of the larger number. So at this point, it would be good if you wanted to pause the video and try and work a couple of these problems on your own. That way you can see if you're on the right track, if you're able to do this without my assistance. And then whenever you're finished, you can come back and check your answers with the video. So I would recommend pausing now and trying a couple of these problems on your own. So let's go ahead and look at problem number 12. Number 12, I've got 4, and then I have to plug in 5 for B, and then -4 for C. So we've got some exponents in here. So I'm going to evaluate those exponents first. So bring down the 4 because it wasn't used. 5 squared means 5 times 5, which is 25. Bring down your -2. -4 squared, which we did up here, is going to be 16. So now I have multiplication, subtraction, and multiplication. So I'm going to take care of the multiplication before subtraction. So 4 times 25 is 100. Think about if you have 4 quarters, you have $1. And then -2 times 16 is going to be -32. And then when we subtract, we have 100 minus 32. That's going to give us 68. Okay, so now let's look at problem number 14. I've got 5 times, and then my b is 5, and then my c is negative 4. Now I know that that can look a little bit confusing, but I mean, you can take away that 5 and say, okay, well that means that I've got a positive 5 minus a negative 4. Okay, don't let all of those parentheses confuse you. Okay, so our order of operations tell us to take care of what's inside of those parentheses first. So I've got to take care of what's inside of here first. So 5 minus negative 4. Well, that's subtraction, so we keep, change. Opposite of negative 4 is a positive 4. So that's 5 plus 4, which is 9. And I didn't use that 5, so I'm going to bring it down. So now I have 5 times 9, which is 45. Okay, now let's look at number 16. On number 16, we have to plug in a negative 4 for C, and then we're going to plug in a 6 for D. So we have to take care of what is inside of these parentheses first. So ignoring this 6, that's 3 times negative 4 minus 6. Well, the multiplication takes precedent because that is multiplication. It comes before subtraction. So 3 times negative 4 is going to give us a negative 12. I'm going to bring down that minus 6, and then I didn't use this 6, so I'm going to bring it down as well. So we still haven't finished everything inside of that set of parentheses. So I have negative 12 minus 6. Keep, change, opposite. So you're adding and your signs are the same, so that means that you're going to add those together and keep the sign. And then we have to bring that 6 down again. That 6 does not drop off until we've used it. Okay? So now 6 times negative 18, it's going to give us a negative, and it's going to be negative 108. Okay? Now let's move on to problem number 18. On problem number 18, they give us C, which is negative 4, times 3A minus D. Okay? So we do what's inside of those parentheses first. So we have multiplication and subtraction. We need to take care of that multiplication first. So 3 times negative 2 is negative 6, minus 6, and then bring down that minus 4. So now, negative 6 minus 6. We're going to keep, we're going to change, and we're going to opposite. So negative 6 plus negative 6 is going to be negative 12. Bring down your negative 4. So now negative 4 times negative 12 is going to give us a positive 48. Moving on to problem number 20. 3A divided by 5B. So I have A is negative 2, and then B is 5. So I plugged in negative 2 for A and then 5 for B. So when we went over the order of operations back in section 0.5, we learned that it's best to evaluate your numerator evaluate your denominator, and then divide at the very end. So 3 times negative 2 is negative 6. 5 times 5 is 25. Okay? And so there's really nothing we can do to this problem. There are no common factors. It's a negative number divided by a positive. So that's all we can do there. Do not be concerned if you get a fraction for an answer. That is okay. So now let's look at problem number 22. So they're keeping along with this fraction trend right now. So I have 2, B was 5, D was 6, and then A was negative 2. So remember, evaluate the numerator, evaluate the denominator, and then divide at the very end. So we're going to do our multiplication up at the top first. So 2 times 5 is 10, and then 3 times 6 is 18, over, I can go ahead and multiply 2 times negative 2 to get negative 4. Okay, so now I'm going to combine my numerator. 10 plus 18 is 28. Bring over your negative 4. So 28 divided by negative 4 is negative 7. Number 24, I have 3D minus 2B over 5A plus D. So D was 6, so that would be 3 times 6 minus 2 times B was 5 over 5. A is negative 2, and then we said D is 6. Work your numerator first, then work your denominator, then divide at the very end. So we need to work these two multiplication problems first. 3 times 6 is 18. Negative 2 times 5 is negative 10. Then down here we have 5 times negative 2, which is negative 10, plus 6. Just bring that 6 over. There was nothing to multiply it, so we just bring it over. So now we're going to go ahead and take care of the rest of the simplification of the numerator and denominator. 18 minus 10 is 8. Negative 10 plus 6. You're adding and your signs are different, so you subtract. And you keep the sign of the bigger number. So 8 divided by negative 4 is negative 2. And that was for problem number 24. So now let's look at problem number 26. D squared minus B squared. Well, D was 6. B is 5. So 6 squared is 36. 5 squared is 25. Now, this is one of the reasons why we are putting these in parentheses. Because if we hadn't put these in parentheses, you might have thought we were squaring that negative. But we're not. That's not included in the 5. Okay? So 36 minus 25 is going to give us 11 for problem number 26. Problem number 28. You have D minus B squared. So that's saying 6 minus 5. 6 minus 5 is 1. 1 squared means 1 times 1, which is just 1. Problem number 30, C minus A times C plus A. Well, let's see here. C was negative 4 minus A is negative 2 times, again, C is negative 4, and then A is negative 2. Okay, so we've got negative 4 minus a negative 2. Okay, And we have to take care of what's inside of these parentheses first before we can multiply them together. So -4 minus -2. Remember your rule for subtraction. It's keep, change. Opposite of -2 is a +2. So I've got -4 plus 2. If you're adding and your signs are different, that means you subtract them and you keep the sign of whatever number was larger. Then -4 plus -2, you're adding and your signs are the same, so you add them and keep their sign. So now -2 times -6 is going to give you a +12. All right. Now looking at number 32, we have c to the third plus a to the third. Well, -4 to the third power means -4 times -4 times -4. Well, -4 times -4 is a +16. And then 16 times -4 is going to give you 64. And that would be a negative because it's a positive times a negative gives you a negative. Then -2 to the third power, -2 times -2 times -2. Well, -2 and -2 is a +4. 4 times -2 is -8. So what we're doing is we are adding these together, and I get that from my addition sign. We have -64 plus -8, which gives us a -72. Okay. Now, let's look at problem number 34. We have c plus a to the third power. So I have my c plus a. So -4 plus -2 is -6. We just did that on the last problem. And then -6 to the third power. So -6 times -6 is 36. 36 times -6 will give you -216. All right, number 36. We have c plus a, c squared minus ac plus a squared. That one looks like a hot mess. So what we need to do is take care of what's inside of the parentheses first. Well, let's do this one first. This one is super easy. -4 plus -2, we've done that many times already, gives you a -6. Now let's work over here. And it's easier to look at your original problem. You can see you have exponents here. So those are going to come first. So -4 squared is going to give you a 16. And then -2 squared is going to give you a +4. So now we work on the multiplication. So we've got a -2 times a -4 is going to give you a +8. Bring that negative down. Now we can go ahead and combine all of these terms. So 16 minus 8 gives you 8. And 8 plus 4 is 12. So now we have -6 times 12, which gives you a -72. Number 38, d squared minus a squared. D is 6. A is -2. Well, we have 6 squared, which is 36, minus -2 squared, which is -2 squared, which is a +4. 36 minus 4 is 32. For number 40, D minus A squared. So D is 6. A is -2. We do it squared. So we have 6 minus -2. Keep, change, opposite. 6 plus 2 is 8. And then 8 squared gives us 64. Now on for our last problem of this lesson on number 42. We have D squared minus 2 times A times D plus A squared. So we have to take care of our exponents first. So 6 squared is 36. And then -2 squared is going to give us a +4. Now we take care of our multiplication in here. So -2 times -2 is a +4. 4 times 6 is 24. So now we add them all together. 36 plus 24 is going to give us 60. 60 plus 4 is 64. I hope that this lesson has helped. Remember, whenever you plug in a number for a variable, you always need to surround it with parentheses. I wish you the best of luck.